Well, hello everybody and welcome. My name's Nathan Hollier. I'm the Director of Monash University Publishing and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to this second in our conversation series that we're running with authors from the press here in the Matheson Library. We're going to be doing one each month of semester, so 6 a year. And today I'm talking with Meredith Fletcher about her book, Jean Galbraith, Writer in a Valley, which we published in August this year. Meredith is a... Do I need that? I do. Meredith is a historian specialising in environmental, local and community history. For 20 years she was director of the Centre for Gippsland Studies at Monash University's Gippsland Campus. She's now an adjunct research fellow at the School of Philosophical, Historical and International Studies here at Monash. I mentioned at the launch of this book, the Melbourne launch of this book, that a number of historians had said to me how much they had admired Meredith's earlier works, and at least one of them, a very prominent one, has since told me how much he's enjoyed reading this work. Just between you and I, Meredith, that was Graham Davison.
I'm pleased about that.
And as the publisher, of course, I'm not exactly a disinterested commentator on the book, but I am certainly extremely proud to have published this book. Well, I have to be careful about the adjectives I use, I think, but undeniably a very well constructed book, narrative, very enjoyable read about a most interesting person in life, which I think you'll also agree is a really beautiful book that we've ended up with. Jean Galbraith was born in 1906 in Tyres, is that how you pronounce it? Which was then barely a town in Gippsland, and she lived there until 1993 when, for health reasons, she moved to the nearby town of Traralgon. She died in 1999, not long before her 93rd birthday. For the great bulk of her life, almost 80 years, she lived in her family home called Dunedin, which contained what I would describe as, well, I'm sure there are better terms, but a monumental garden. There are photos of it in there, obviously. There's also that a copy of that wonderful painting by Peter Cuffley of Dunedin in the book. Jean is remembered as an important scholar of Australian botany who wrote 3 editions of the seminal Wildflowers of Victoria and a field guide to the wildflowers of Southeast Australia, published by Collins, amongst other numerous works. She's remembered as a very successful popular writer on nature, plants and gardens for both children and adults, as an advocate for the enjoyment and preservation of plants, especially wildflowers in their native habitat, and as a person who lived a life that remained very simple but that was characterised by seemingly faultless kindness and very strong ongoing human relations, friendships. Meredith, you note at the outset that this is not a biography containing sensational or shocking revelations. Yes. We're not dealing with Liz Taylor and Richard Burt.
No.
And I'll just one tiny little quote. Josephine Piggin, who you quote, writing to a friend after Galbraith's death, said, "Her simplicity of life, wanting for nothing, coveting nothing, in thorough appreciation and enjoyment of every moment, of every happening, her great first-hand knowledge of her environment and philosophy of life has become greatly meaningful to me. With age, I'm appreciating it more and more." Where did you hear of Jean Galbraith and why did you decide to write about her?
Well, I live in Gippsland and I was working at Monash University Gippsland's campus, and my area of interest is environmental history. So all of those things came together for wanting to write about Jean, but I actually first met her before I started or even thought about doing the biography. I think it was in the mid-1980s when her book Garden in a Valley, which had first been published in 1939, was republished. And it became an immediate success, a sort of a cult gardening classic, I suppose you could describe it. And I went to visit and to see the garden and took an elderly friend there to visit. And when I think back on it now, because obviously, it was when I first met Jean, it's important to me to remember that, I'm ashamed to admit that I don't really remember the garden. Here's this famous garden that people were flocking to see from around Australia, and I don't have really clear memories of it. But the memories that I had most of all were of Jean in her dining room, which was her writing room. And actually there's a photo of her there. It was a scholar's room, it was erudite. It was full of nature because there were flowers, vases of flowers everywhere, specimens everywhere. There were all her botanical references, there were her card indexes with entries on Australian wildflowers. But it was a room, as Nathan said, that she'd lived in for about 80 years. So there was a feeling of sort of nature-filled, a sort of almost a spirituality about it as well. And the garden I just remembered as a magical place that kids would really enjoy exploring. So having first gone and visited Jean then, I then later caught up with her when she'd moved into her retirement unit in Yallourn in Traralgon, because I'd been asked as part of my work at Monash to do an exhibition on Gippsland naturalists. So we chose 5 Gippsland naturalists and Jean Galbraith was one of them. So I went and interviewed her then. And then my next sort of meeting with Jean was in, I think, in the late, I can't remember exactly when, but a friend of mine who's now one of our most prominent environmental historians, Tom Griffiths, was working at the time at the State Library as the field officer, and Jean was donating her papers to the State Library. And Tom came and we were living in Maffra at the time and stayed with us at Maffra. And every day he went and worked with Jean, collecting her enormous papers, a huge archive. And every night he'd bring them back and they were spread from one end of the lounge room to the other end of the lounge room. Then he'd be off, another lot, fill the lounge room, into the dining room now. And he said, have a look at them if you want to. And I did. And that's when I sort of got some insights into the fact that Jean Galbraith was really such a significant person in writing about plants, in the way that she could inform people about plants and nature. And so I think it was all of those things that contributed to making me want to write about her.